So last week we started this new series called Summer. We're walking through the Sermon on the Mount, probably Jesus' most famous sermon that he gave. In this Sermon on the Mount, we get the introduction of that in what we call the Beatitudes. And in the Beatitudes, Jesus begins painting this portrait of what it looks like to be citizens in God's kingdom. And so last week we saw all that. We looked at, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And we saw that kingdom people know they need God. Kingdom people grieve what sin has. Kingdom people choose humility over self-promotion, and kingdom people hunger for righteousness. And these first four Beatitudes, they primarily deal with what God is doing on the inside of us. Right? We recognize our emptiness, our sadness and brokenness over what sin lives, and how we are continuing to give over our strength to God. They deal with primarily what's inside of us, this holy emptiness, if you will. Now, in the next four Beatitudes that we're going to look at today, Jesus begins to talk about fullness rather than emptiness. The hunger for this begins to be satisfied in three major ways: through mercy and purity and peacemaking. Because what's happening inside eventually always becomes visible on the outside. In my student ministry days, what big popular games for us to play were food. And those have kind of died out a little bit, probably for good reason. But one of my favorite games that I came up with is that I got 3 Twinkies and set them on a plate. Now, one Twinkie was just a normal Twinkie. Delicious golden sponge cake with some cream-filled frosting in it. Delicious. The other 2 Twinkies, well, I got the fun job of sucking out all of the deliciousness inside, and then I injected mustard in one and mayonnaise in the other. And so the idea, right, was you get a couple volunteers, and I had 3 plates. We're going to have a Twinkie eating contest. And, of course, these kids are like, yeah, I love Twinkies. And they rush up there, and they're like, I want to volunteer. And so you place them. He's like, all right, we eat from left to right. So the first one, you get just the normal original Twinkie, right? And they devour it. They knock it down. And I think the next one was mayonnaise. And, of course, as soon as they stick it in their mouth, they squish down. They're like, ugh. Like, something's wrong. This icing's gone bad. I'm like, no, it's not bad. Just eat it. And they're like, nope. Not eating it whatsoever, and they run off, and I'm like, all right, so then it reveal. But essentially, here's what it is, right? Everything looks good on the outside, right? But even with our lives, eventually what was inside these Twinkies had to come out, right? It became noticeable, right? We can only hide what's in our hearts for so long. Eventually, the way we treat people, the way we respond to conflict, the way we handle opposition reveals who or what is ruling our heart. And that's where Jesus goes next in these next few Beatitudes. And what we'll see is that kingdom character produces kingdom influence. Kingdom character produces kingdom influence. These characteristics that Jesus is saying, this is what it looks like to be a part of. That is going to produce a kingdom influence in your life towards other people. And if Jesus is in the business of forming our hearts, then he's also in the business of forming our actions, because we know that our actions flow from what is inside of our hearts. And as he continues to form our heart, formed and changed, then so is our mouth, so is our relationships, so is our priorities, so is our witness. Because as our heart is transformed more and more into the likeness of Jesus, we continue to live that out more and more in an active way. And the first way our actions are formed we see is in Matthew 5:7. As we continue, Matthew 5:7 says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. See, I think one of the greatest misunderstandings of mercy is a lot of times we confuse mercy with justice. Justice gives people what they deserve, right? When you mess up or, somebody does something wrong, they break the law, we want justice to prevail. We want that person to get what they deserve. But mercy gives people what they don't deserve. Mercy gives people what they don't deserve. And in the culture of Jesus, they expected justice, much like we expect justice when someone breaks the law in our culture, right? And we do this in the same way. If someone wrongs us, if they mistreat us, if they owe us something and they don't pay up, right, we want them to get what they deserve. Man, that person really made me mad. I hope they get what they deserved. Like, man, I know I should probably just pray for them. Well, I just pray that they'll step off a curb and twist their ankle or something, right? That's praying for them, but we want them to get what they deserve. And ironically, right, we usually want people to get what they deserve, but when we mess up, right, we want mercy. Oh, it's just a mistake. Give me a break. I don't deserve what you're trying to give me. And we know God pursues and practices justice. We see this all throughout the Bible. We see that when God's like, hey, God's justice will prevail. He seeks justice. He desires justice. But we see God's justice, His grace all work together. You see, God's justice says that sin must be paid for. These wrongs must be paid for. That has to be dealt with. But God's mercy comes in and says He will pay the price for us. What is deserved, He will take it on and give us what we don't deserve. Come in and say, here is the blessing of salvation that you don't deserve. And as kingdom citizens, we recognize that debt in our life. That's ties back into this the blessed are those who mourn, this brokenness of this sin that we have in our own lives. And we say, man, I deserve so much worse than what God gives me through His mercy. And then as kingdom citizens, we recognize this debt that we've had forgiven and this mercy that we've been shown. And in turn, we're called to show mercy to others. See, kingdom people extend the mercy they have received. Kingdom people mercy they have received. Jesus tells a parable illustrating this point later on in Matthew 18. So this parable of the unforgiving servant, and essentially the breakdown of this parable is that there's this master, and this servant comes before him, and he says, Master, I owe you a lot of money, but please have mercy. And the master feels sorry for him. He has mercy on him. He said, hey, I will forgive you of all that you owe me. Go and live your life. And so he goes, and he's excited. And then this servant comes across another person that owes him money. And it's a very significantly less amount that he owed this master. And he says, hey, you need to pay me my money. And the guy's like, no, have mercy on me. Please forgive me. I can't do it. And the servant's like, well, I'm going to throw you in prison then until you can pay me back what you owe me. So word gets back to this master, and this master's super angry about, he's like, this person mercy and forgiveness, and he does not show the same thing. And actually we see at the end of this parable in 32-33 of Matthew 18, it says, then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said. I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have your fellow servant just as I had on you? See, this man has shown mercy, but then he refuses to extend mercy. Why does he do that? Well, I think it's because the mercy he received never reached his heart. Right? He realizes, like, oh yeah, thank you for forgiving me, but really truly feels the impact of what has been forgiven. He never truly realizes the seriousness of his situation that he was in. And so he continues to live his life and not extend mercy as well. And he doesn't allow his heart to be transformed and changed by the mercy that he was. And you see how this beatitude, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy, flows out of the other beatitudes from last week. When we realize our spiritual poverty, when we mourn the brokenness that sin has created in our lives and in the world, and we surrender our strength to God, and we hunger and thirst for righteousness in our lives, begin to be filled by extending this mercy that we've received. And that's what I love about this word mercy, right? There's this action idea of mercy, right? Mercy isn't just, hey, I feel sorry for you. Man, I'm sad that you're going through this. No, it literally means compassion. Compassion in action. It doesn't just say, hey, I feel sorry for you. I hope things get better for you. No, I'm gonna realize the mercy that's been shown to me, and I'm gonna put my compassion into action in your life to help you know that you can experience the same mercy. But it's important to know that mercy doesn't excuse sin. It doesn't ignore the truth of what's happened. But mercy refuses to let someone's worst moment become their permanent identity. To say, like, what you've done to me, what you've done to other people, the sins that you've committed, that's not going to be who I am, as I'm going to continue to show mercy as God has shown mercy to me. And so as citizens of God's kingdom, we reflect on how God has treated us to determine how we should treat others. So I think it's a fair question to ask, man, who is it difficult to love in your life? Have you written off because of what they've done or spoken against you? Who owes you something that you're just harboring this bitterness towards them? Because as kingdom citizens, we don't have to wonder, well, should I show them mercy because they've wronged me? Instead, we ask ourselves, did I deserve it? No. But I was shown mercy anyways, and that's how I need to respond. See, mercy changes how we see people, and then Jesus continues to move deeper down through these Beatitudes. In Matthew 5:8, he says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." See, in our minds, purity is often reduced to a behavior. We usually connect it to sexual purity, right? Be pure, continue to protect your marriage or protect yourself, keep yourself sexually pure. But when Jesus talks about purity, he had something much deeper in mind than just the action. You see, purity means clean, but it also refers to being unmixed, right? You think of getting a pure piece of gold, right? It's 100% gold. There's nothing degrading it or nothing mixed in with it. Another great example of this is one of my favorite parts about Vacation Bible School this week is that we had I personally love snow cones. And so I'm standing in line waiting for my snow cone, and all these little VBS kids are like, oh, what flavors are you going to mix? What are you going to put together? Are you going to put watermelon with blue raspberry? Or they had a boogers flavor. They were sold out, but I did question it. And I was like, no, I'm not mixing my flavors. Because when it comes to snow cones, I'm going to admit, I'm a purist when it comes to my flavors. Right? I want to experience one flavor in its purity, in all of its glory. So I had mango, and it was delicious. And I got to experience just that one flavor. There was no other flavors in there. Snow cone experience. And it's no accident that Jesus chooses the heart to be pure either. Like this unadulterated heart, this heart that's not mixed. Because to the ancient Hebrews, the heart was not just the seat of emotions like we think of it. But it was the center of the mind. It was the center of will and intellect, moral choices. And so when Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart, he's saying, blessed are those whose hearts have a single-minded devotion towards God. See, kingdom people pursue wholehearted devotion to God. Kingdom people pursue devotion to God. Augustine, who was one of the great theologians of the early church, he famously prayed this in connection to this beatitude. He said, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." And I think that's exactly what we're getting at. Every one of us is searching for something, right? We're searching for significance. We're searching for purpose. We're searching for security or satisfaction. And the problem isn't that we are searching, that we should search. But often the problem is where we are searching. See, our hearts become divided because we're constantly asking created things to do only what a creator can do. And that's why Augustine says that our hearts are restless until they rest in Jesus. Our hearts are never designed to find ultimate rest anywhere but in God. You see, a pure heart isn't a heart that never struggles or that doesn't think, oh, where can I find satisfaction? But a pure heart is a heart that says, Jesus, above everything else, I want you in my life. I want you to rule my life. I want to have all my devotion. And when Jesus treasure, everything else in life, it'll find its proper place. It'll fall into line and allow Jesus to continue to shape our hearts so that when we pursue him, these other things will continue to align with his will for our lives as well. And I think that sums up the promise as well, right? Pure heart of wholehearted devotion is seeing God face to face, right? It's being in the presence of God where pure rest is found. You see, ultimately that promise is about a promise of relationship. It's a promise of presence. You can't see someone not in their presence. And King David thought this was such an important idea that our hearts shouldn't be divided. He prays in Psalm 86, verse 11, he says, "Teach me your way, Lord, that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart, that I may fear your name." His prayer that God takes away every distraction of the heart from him so that he can keep his number one focus on God. See, when our hearts are not pure, when they're divided and other devotions compete with God, we will never fully have a heart at rest. Always spread our attention across multiple devotions. The Beatitudes continue to progress, and when our hearts become whole, our relationships begin to heal. Matthew 5:9 says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be of God." And I think usually when we hear the word peace, we automatically think of no conflict, right? You think of the sayings like, happy wife, happy life, happy spouse, happy house, all those things, right? And we just think, oh, if everyone's just happy, we just keep the peace, then there'll just be no conflict, there'll be no fighting. Countries in a time of peace, we say, well, they're just not at war with any other countries right now. They're not at a conflict with anybody. But biblically, peace means things made right. See, in Jewish thought, peace, they use this word shalom, and they continue to even use it within their greetings to this day. But this idea of peace, shalom, was not just fighting or the absence of conflict. It meant wholeness. It meant complete well-being and restoring things to the way God intended them to be. So when you talk about a relationship of peace, you would say, hey, I'm restoring this relationship to how God wants this relationship to be restored. That we're seen in equal footing, both as people made in God's image, both people loved by God. So being a peacemaker means actively reconciling broken relationships. It means actively restoring things to the way God intended them to be. And notice Jesus doesn't say, hey, blessed are the peacekeepers, right? Because peacekeepers usually avoid conflict. Peacekeepers say, oh, no, let's keep the peace, let's just not even talk about this, or let's not bring it up because it's just going to cause more conflict. But Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, because a peacemaker actively steps into conflict to redeem it. Jesus doesn't avoid conflict. Right, we see all throughout his ministry, the times where he's in conflict with the Pharisees or the Sadducees or the religious leaders or the teachers or the people that he's continuing to lead. He steps into these conflicts to help bring redemption into them. He confronts sin. He reconciles people back to God, and he believed in this so much that he went to the cross to reconcile our relationships, to bring peace to the ultimate conflict maker that is sin. Bonhoeffer, he was a German theologian and pastor during the time of Hitler's rise of power, and he continually spoke against what was going on in Germany during this time, and even apparently was involved in an assassination attempt. But talking about what it means to be a peacemaker, like he is living in the most probably conflicted countries of the time. And he talks about what it means to be a peacemaker in a book called The Cost of Discipleship. He says, the followers of Jesus have been called to peace. They maintain peace by choosing to suffer, causing others to suffer. And they preserve fellowship where others would break it. You see, our natural instinct is to protect ourselves. If I want peace in my life, I need to protect myself and make sure that I'm okay so that I have peace. If someone hurts us, we want to hurt them back. If someone criticizes us, we want to criticize them. If someone wounds us, we want them to feel the pain that we felt. But Jesus calls us to do something entirely different. And as Bonhoeffer says that, we need to, sometimes in order to maintain peace, we have to choose to suffer instead of causing others to suffer. And as peacemakers, we have to realize that it might cost us something to pursue in our own lives. And that's why peacemaking, I think, is so difficult. Sometimes it costs us our pride because we have to apologize first. Sometimes we have to recognize that maybe the brokenness that we're experiencing in a relationship, maybe it was caused by us. The person that, hey, that came out of nowhere. I don't know why they're saying that about me. Maybe we played a part in it. So it costs us our pride to say, you know what? I need to be the bigger person. I need to do what God's called me to do, and I need to apologize. Sometimes it costs us comfort because, well, we have to have a difficult conversation, and those are no fun. Sometimes it costs us our reputation because we have to refuse to participate in gossip. Maybe in order to keep peace, we'd say, I'm not going to be a part of that. And the people are like, well, I guess you're not as cool as we thought you were. You're right, I'm not. Sometimes it costs us maybe our rights because we have to choose forgiveness over revenge. Sometimes it costs us our preferences because we are going to believe that unity matters more than getting our own way. And that's why Jesus doesn't say, blessed are the peace lovers. Right? Everyone loves the idea of peace. But peace doesn't happen accidentally. It has to be pursued. It has to be made. It has to, every act of biblical peacemaking points us back to Jesus because no one paid a greater price than Jesus did for peace. Paul says it this way in Colossians 1:19-20. He says, for God was pleased to have his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. See, the greatest act of suffering that Jesus went through provides peace for all of us as we enter into a relationship with him. Our peace with God doesn't come because God ignored and it said, oh, let's just keep the peace and not actually jump into this conflict with these people. But our peace came because Jesus willingly absorbed the cost himself. And as followers of Jesus, we reflect him when we're willing to absorb the cost of reconciliation instead of escalating conflict. I think Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Because when we make peace, we look like our Father. And we resemble the God who made peace with us through his Son. So ultimately we see that kingdom people reflect Jesus by making peace. Kingdom people reflect Jesus by making peace. But here's the reality. Not everyone appreciates a peacemaker. Not everyone appreciates those who extend mercy to others. Not everyone appreciates those who wholeheartedly pursue Jesus and strive towards Jesus. Which leads us to this final beatitude. Matthew 5:10-11 says, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. See, Jesus ends the Beatitudes with persecution. And notice the connection to even hunger and thirst for righteousness. You have these first three Beatitudes, then a hunger and thirst for righteousness. You have the next, it's blessed are those who are persecuted because of that righteousness that you're hungering for. And I think he ends the Beatitudes intentionally, as Jesus often does. He's been building these characteristics on what it means to be a citizen of his kingdom. As him, and as he changes us, it changes how we relate to the world around us. He knows that we're going to need some encouragement to stand firm, because kingdom people stand firm when the world pushes back. Kingdom people stand firm when the world pushes back. You know, faithfulness is always applauded. Sometimes, oftentimes, it's resisted. And we know that around the world, persecution might look different. Persecution is going to look different where Landon was than it does for us today. You know, I can honestly probably look at my life and not think of a whole lot of times and personally felt like I was persecuted. The only time that I felt slightly persecuted was when I first moved to California and I was trying to get enrolled to finish my schooling. And I'm talking to this advisor at this college, and she said, well, you're from Oklahoma. They don't have critical thinking classes, so we need to get you signed up. And I thought, the audacity. We think good in Oklahoma, right? But it was just, I later realized it was just what they called a specific amount of courses, and we didn't have those courses. But yeah, so like I look at those times, I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty persecuted. But there are times where people have looked down on me because of what I believed, thought I was closed-minded because of the faith that I had, maybe weren't really interested in talking to me after they learned what I do for a living or what God has called me to, even just be faithful. People that didn't want to include me because of a belief that I had. Faithfulness isn't always applauded. Oftentimes it's resisted. If you consistently choose mercy, some people are going to call you weak. Some people are going to call you narrow-minded. And if you make peace, some people are going to accuse you of taking sides. But if you follow Jesus, some people are not going to understand. Because when we follow Jesus, we'll inevitably collide with the values of a broken world. Just what happens. Our world is broken. Sin has continued to wreak havoc. And as we follow Jesus and be faithful, we're going to collide with the values of this world. Not because we're out there intentionally looking for a fight. It's not like we're going out in the night saying, oh man, who can we get in an argument with? Offend people. We're just saying, this is the truth. This is what God has revealed. This is what it means to live a blessed life and to live in his kingdom and to have salvation. But we're going to collide with them because we're living under a different king. And when two kingdoms move in opposite directions, collision is inevitable. But again, notice how Jesus chooses his words. All right, he doesn't say, blessed are those who are persecuted. He says, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. All right, there's a difference. If you're suffering or persecuted because you made a dumb decision, that's not a blessing. Decision. Right? If you're suffering because you're arrogant or argumentative or unnecessarily offensive, well, that's not persecution of righteousness. That's persecution because you're a jerk. Right? But if you're faithfully following Jesus, you're living according to his kingdom and yourself and your life with these characteristics, if you're loving your enemies and you're extending mercy and you're pursuing holiness and making peace and people reject you because of that, well, then Jesus says you are blessed. And then Jesus gives this counterintuitive command in verse 12 following the last beatitude. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. See, Jesus doesn't say, hey, when you're blessed are you who are persecuted, and if you are persecuted, just hang in there. Just toughen up, just endure it. No, he says rejoice. Be glad. You see, Jesus knows something that we don't always see, as Jesus often does. He knows the reward is greater than the suffering and the persecution that we face on this earth. I mean, after all, he's the only one speaking right now who is actually seeing what the reward is. Right? He's come from the Father. He knows the glory of God's kingdom in its fullness. He knows what awaits those of us who continue to remain faithful. And that's why he can confidently tell his followers, don't trade this reward for temporary approval. Rejoice, be glad, because your faithfulness, the reward of that faithfulness, the fullness of being in God's kingdom is far greater, far more blissful and amazing than these temporary sufferings and persecutions that you might face. And he says, you're also in good company. All right? The prophets, they were rejected. Later on, as we see throughout after Jesus' death and resurrection, we see the apostles are often rejected. Jesus himself was rejected. Faithfulness always brings a cost, but the reward has always, and it always will be worth it. So we know that in this life, our popularity will fade if that's what we choose to chase. Our approval will come and go. Our comfort will be temporary for the earthly comforts that we look for, but we can be confident that God's kingdom is forever. And that's why kingdom people stand firm. Not because suffering is good, but because Jesus is better. See, when we faithfully follow Jesus, there will be moments when the world pushes back. Jesus promises that. He says it's going to happen. But that's not the only response our faithfulness will always receive. There will often be times when our faithfulness will be met with opposition. There are people who will reject the values of God's kingdom because those values challenge the way they want to live. Right? Mercy will confront their bitterness. Purity will confront compromise. Confront the divisions that they continue to build in their lives. Because living under the authority of King Jesus confronts the illusion that we are the king of our own lives. And people don't like to be confronted with that fact, that I'm not in control of my life, that I'm not the king or queen of my life. And when people reject this, when they are have opposition, not rejecting you or rejecting me or rejecting us, they are rejecting the life of Jesus they see in you. Opposition shouldn't surprise us. But again, opposition isn't the only way people might respond. Sometimes our faithfulness will awaken curiosity. Who encounters kingdom living pushes them away. There are times when some people lean in, right? They see something different in how we live our lives and the ethics that we live by. And they think, man, how can these people forgive so freely when they've been wronged? How can they have so much peace when everything around them seems to be falling apart? Why aren't they chasing the same thing everyone else is chasing? And when people are asking about these things, that's a good indicator that they see Jesus in you. Because people don't just ask about hope unless they see it. Ask about the peace and the mercy that you're showing unless they've witnessed it in your life. And people don't just ask about Jesus unless they've seen something of Jesus inside of his people. See, our faithfulness becomes an invitation for others to ask questions they may have never asked before. And so when our lives collide with a broken world, there are two responses, right? There's opposition, but others will also be drawn to it. And our responsibility isn't to determine the response. Our responsibility is simply to reflect Jesus faithfully. Whether someone responds with opposition, our calling remains the same, to faithfully represent our King as we live out in his kingdom. So the last 2 weeks, Jesus has been painting this portrait with these Beatitudes, right? It's not a portrait of the perfect Christian of saying, hey, have all your stuff together and look exactly like this, make these Beatitudes 100% all the time. It's not a portrait of a super spiritual Christian. It's just a picture of a citizen of his kingdom. We've learned that as kingdom people, we need God, that we're going to grieve what sin has broken, that we surrender our strength instead of demanding control, that we never stop pursuing righteousness, that we extend mercy because we've been given mercy. We pursue integrity over image as we search and pursue God wholeheartedly. And we make peace on purpose, firm when the world pushes back. And if you're anything like me, when I usually read through the Beatitudes, I've read through them several times. I've read through them a lot, obviously, recently. But I read through this portrait of what this looks like to be a citizen in God's kingdom, and I think to myself, man, I got a long ways to go. There's a lot of stuff that I got to continue to do better. I got to work on. But that's exactly the point, right? The Beatitudes aren't these 8 boxes to check off, like, oh, yep, did some peacemaking today. Oh, yep, hey, I got pure of heart down. Or, hey, man, I really mourned. No, it's the life Jesus is forming within us, right? The disciples sitting on this hillside that were following Jesus, they didn't look anything like this yet, right? We see that Peter constantly opened his mouth up before he thought. He was not meek. James and John, there was these disciples, their nicknames were the sons of thunder, not the nicknames of sons of peace. Matthew, who was a tax collector, and people hated him, like they would have hated giving their money to him. They would have seen him as a traitor with mercy. Thomas, as we know, would wrestle with doubt in his life. He would have a divided heart. Yet Jesus looked at these ordinary, unfinished people and began describing the people that they were becoming and who they would become in his kingdom. What discipleship is. He doesn't simply call us to follow him. He forms us as we follow him. He patiently shapes our hearts until our lives begin to reflect his. Another way we can say is this is what spiritual formation is. All right, it's the lifelong work of the Holy Spirit using God, the people of God, and the circumstances in our life to make us more like Jesus day by day. Now, as we close this section on the Sermon on the Mount, I don't want you to leave thinking, man, I need to try harder this week because I'm really failing at these Beatitudes. But just leave asking yourself the question, what beatitude is being formed in me right now? What beatitude is being formed in me right now? Maybe he's teaching you to depend on him more deeply in this season of your life. Maybe he's breaking your heart over something that breaks his, revealing to you of something that is just continuing to see a broken world. Maybe he's calling you to lay down control in your life, to say, you know what, I'm gonna enter into this kingdom. I'm gonna have him form me into a person who's meek, who has strength, but surrenders it to God. Maybe he's creating a deeper hunger in life. Maybe he's asking you to extend mercy to someone that you haven't wanted to extend mercy to pursue purity, maybe to take away some of the things competing for your heart. Maybe he's calling you to make peace with someone. Know that there's a broken relationship that you haven't the desire or will to seek reconciliation in. Or maybe he's just saying, you know what, remain faithful. Remain faithful to me because there are times following me becomes costly. And I think the Holy Spirit is always forming something in those who are following Jesus. He's always forming something in us. As we close this section out, just remember the goal of discipleship isn't simply to know the teachings of Jesus. It isn't simply to say, hey, I know the Beatitudes. The goal is to allow Jesus to form those teachings and allow them to be active within our life. One day we know that this work of formation will be complete. One day we'll see Jesus face to face, be like him, but until that day we keep following and we keep surrendering and we keep trusting the Spirit to shape us into the kind of people Jesus describes within these Beatitudes. Because the Beatitudes are an invitation to become more of the people God has created us to be. Let me pray for you guys. God, we just thank you for this picture of what it looks like to be in your kingdom. God, and we do know it can be hard for us to look at this list and be like, man, I got a lot of work to do. But God, we just pray that you'll continue to form these characteristics into our life. God, if we see an area in our life that needs more attention from you, God, we just, God, give us the willingness and the boldness and just the wisdom to turn those over to you. God, knowing that these characteristics continue to develop influence within our communities, within our circles of influence. God, as we continue to live these, put them into action. God, we pray that it points more people towards you. We know there's plenty of room in your kingdom. So God, help us be a people that live as your citizens and invite more people in to experience the fullness that you offer. We just thank you and we praise you for all.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about our church, get involved with our ministry, or ask for prayer, visit faith-family.org. We hope you have a wonderful week and look forward to seeing you again soon.